Hello, Manchester, and welcome to another edition of Girard at Large. I am your pre-recorded host, your Memorex host, for those of you who remember. Is it live or is it Memorex? Yes, well, today I'm Memorex, but we have an important show for you tonight. As you know, you can find us online at girardatlarge.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, also at Girard at Large, where we encourage you to like us and to follow us. Why? Well, we'll bring you information that others will fear to bring you, even though it's true. And that's one of those subjects we're going to tackle tonight. And what follows this brief introduction is a recording, a speech given by a fellow named Michael Shellenberger, not exactly a charter member of evilconservative.com. But Shellenberger has risked alienating himself from all of the usual liberal causes that he associates with because he decided there was something wrong with how this country is dealing with homelessness. And he did some unbelievable research, which he has shared not just in the video I'm about to show you, but in a book he's written on the topic. And so, since Manchester is insistent on heading in what I believe is the wrong direction on homelessness, I wanted to share this with you because now we have a mayor who ran for mayor, criticizing the former mayor and his opponent, Kevin Kavanaugh, of being do-nothings on homelessness. And since taking office, Jay Rouet has earned the title Joyce Craig 2.0 because not only has he not changed any of the policies or practices that Joyce Craig put into motion to deal with this process, he has absolutely doubled down on them, and they're dangerous for our city, as the video you're about to see is going to show you and explain why. What they're advocating doesn't work. The causes of homelessness are not what these people would have you believe. The reasons for homelessness are rather alarming, but they do have concrete ways to be addressed. And it's not what we're being told. It's not we need more affordable housing. It's not we need housing first policies. It's not that we need more harm reduction. It's not that we need more low barrier shelters that meet people where they're at. And all of the stuff that Adrienne Beloin was on her high horse about, all of the stuff that Jay Rouet buys into, all of the stuff that Joyce Craig put into motion. And now Jay Rouet is fixing to really double down on these efforts. The first thing we need to understand is what causes homelessness. And I wish I had the video so I could share it with you now. But remember our friend Robert, the man who went to the listening session hosted by Adrienne, too qualified for the job, Beloin, who espouses all-day coffee as a solution to homelessness, and the bearded wonder, who is our harm reduction specialist. I mean, no disrespect to the man, I just don't know his name. But Robert, among others, who, if you talk to the homeless in this city, will tell you that they are homeless by choice. And the reason why they're homeless by choice, well, there are several reasons, some amazingly eye-opening reasons you're going to see in this video from homeless people that Shellenberger interviewed himself. Now, a note on this, might not be a great idea to have young ears around the TV. Some of these homeless people use language that's just a little salty. There's not a lot of it, but there are a few, how should we say, disturbing words that get used on occasion. So I don't know if the control room would try to bleep them out. If they do, great. If they don't, you're warned. It's not a lot, but there's some. But as he interviews the homeless, he gives you the reasons. And what you need to know is that those reasons are at play here in the city of Manchester and here in the state of New Hampshire, such that, let me share this with you right now, such that, as you see this graph, this is from the U.S. homeless count from the Department of Housing, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's the number of homeless people per thousand in each jurisdiction, each state, including Washington, D.C., which leads the pack with 72.49 homeless people per 100,000 residents. And we see New York, Vermont, Oregon, California, Hawaii. We come down here to New Hampshire. We are number 16 in the nation at 17.41. Now, we're a far cry from 72, but we're also a far cry from Mississippi at the bottom at 3.34. We also happen to be the fourth worst Republican state in the nation. And I attribute that to a lot of the policies that have been passed since the spice epidemic hit the state. Remember that? Things like Good Samaritan laws that say people who are at the scene of a drug overdose can't be arrested for their illegal activity because, well, if they are under threat of being arrested for their illegal activity, they won't call it in and people will die of drug overdoses. And there are a variety of other things like, gee, we go to the homeless people and we sign them up for food stamps. We sign them up for cash assistance. We sign them up for Medicaid. We help them get their Obama phone. I mean, we make it pretty comfortable governmentally for them to live on the streets. And then there are all the do-gooder organizations that are busy about the business of giving them tents and food and clothes and all of the things they need to comfortably be under a bridge, in a park, in the woods, on a sidewalk, in a, on a bench, in a doorway, and there are no consequences. And as you're about to see, the no consequences thing and this enabling behavior is a critical factor for this thing spiraling out of control. So what we're going to see in this video are all of the things across the country that have uniformly led to this explosion of homelessness, including here in the Granite State. And hopefully it will inform people about all of the stuff they're talking about, best practices, experts. I feel like I'm back on the school board. What have the best practices and what have the experts gotten us except these lousy results? So if the people that whose advice has been followed has gotten us the results that just don't work, then maybe we should start looking at something else. And there are answers. There are simple answers, honestly. Doesn't make them easy, and people confuse simple and easy all the time. And they shouldn't. But simple is simple. And doing the hard work that addresses both the cause and the solution is what we need to focus on. And we need to just stop creating these straw men. Whoa, we need more affordable housing. Look, it doesn't matter how affordable the housing is. If the junkie wants to be on the streets because he wants to shoot up, then it's not going to work. It's not going to work. People are like, housing first. We need housing first. Do we? Well, you may not know what housing first is, and you may not know why that's a bad idea, but you're about to find out. Just like you're about to find out a whole lot of other things on this issue. And just know that your city and your state, for the most part, continue to pursue policies that get more homelessness. Okay? And the idea, people walking around saying, well, we have 60% fewer encampments now. A, I really don't believe that. But B, if having a 40-bed emergency shelter at 39 Beach Street, which has caused crime to go through the roof in that neighborhood, is responsible for a 60% decrease in people being on the street, yeah, I'm not buying that. I think what you've seen is probably a lot of smaller camps have coalesced into bigger camps. And we're starting to hear more and more about where some of these camps are. And you mark my words, as the weather gets better, you're going to see more of this. Don't believe me? Yeah, take a daytime walk by, but not through Victory Park, and you'll start to see what's really coming. It's all, as the weather improves, so will the visibility of the homeless will improve too. So that's what I have to say here. I I'm begging you, watch this video. It's going to share a lot of truths that are inconvenient to the political narrative. And hopefully you will bring it to the attention of your alderman, the mayor here in the Queen City. Manchester should not be allocating its resources to these approaches that have proven to fail in reducing the number of homeless people on the streets. And hopefully you'll see the broad, bright outlines of what does work and start insisting that it be done. I am your ever humble host, Rich Girard. Until next week, be good, be well, don't do anything we wouldn't do. We're proud to have in the audience. Thanks so much for being there. And now our feature presentation. Good night.
We are here now to welcome one of the most important voices in public discourse in America today. Michael Shellenberger has newly been appointed as the CBR Chair of Politics, Censorship and Free Speech at the University of Austin. Michael is a best-selling author. He was a publisher of the Twitter Files. He testifies and advises governments worldwide. In addition to being a fantastic public intellectual, somebody growing in stature and getting all the attention that he deserves on his work, is a fantastically generous person, and I think somebody who we can see is going to be a wonderful teacher for our students here at the university.
By now, you've all heard the news that poverty causes homelessness. We've always known that most homelessness is a result, pure and simple, of poverty, the lack of a living wage, the lack of affordable housing, and the insidious impact of racism. You hear people saying things like, you can't just house people who have addiction problems. You can and you must. Margaret Cushell, UC San Francisco, and the New York Times, one of the 3 most important and influential researchers on homelessness. Drug decriminalization works. Portugal has succeeded where we failed with addiction. Decriminalizing substance use works in Portugal and it can work in Oregon, says neuroscientist and health journalist. Harm reduction saves lives. In San Francisco, the city government put billboards around the city with the theme No Overdose, KNOW, take it easy. Go slow and use less at first to test the strength of your drugs. Do it with friends. Use with people and take turns. Try not to use alone and have someone check on you. We're better together. Know the signs if someone is overdosing. Carry Naxalone or Narcan and know how to use it. I interviewed the policy director of the Drug Policy Alliance, which is the most influential drug policy organization in the country. We're going to see if you can hear this, but we'll try to show this. The first thing she says is, you can see that my earrings are syringes.
I'm actually wearing my syringe earrings today, but I mean, that was not planned. Portugal has done a great job because on the one hand, what they did was they decriminalized drugs, which led to this shift in beliefs. It'll be a model for other states because it's built off of a model that we already know that works from Portugal.
In San Francisco, there's a fair amount of open air drug use. You know, people like that shoot and smoke in public.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because people don't have other safe spaces to go. This is exactly where safer consumption spaces fit in. They're not for the average everyday user who has a place to go and who has someone who can sit there and be there with them. These are specifically targeted for people who have nowhere else to go, who may not have that support network of someone who's around to respond, and who may need a safe space where they can take their time and use. One of the strategies that's being promoted in light of fentanyl being in our drug supply is check your drugs, first of all, to see if fentanyl is in there. And if fentanyl is in there, go slow, right? Don't mix. Make sure someone with Narcan is on hand. And the easiest way to do that is if you're not rushed and if you're in a safe consumption spaces and you're not worried about a cop coming by and arresting you or someone from the community harassing you.
In Portugal, if somebody is using drugs in public, what happens to them?
They are told where the nearest safer consumption space is, but a police officer will not arrest them. In the United States, there's still such an impulse to like get a cop involved and to still say that there's a line at which we have to arrest someone. And I think that that question is just not even part of the equation in how they look at this anymore.
In your view, has Portugal normalized drug use?
They've normalized it as some people cope with life by using drugs. Some people cope with life by exercising. Like, so they've normalized it as like a strategy that some people use.
It sounds as though what you're saying is that really we shouldn't be coercing people at all into treatment. Is that right?
Yeah, we just need to make treatment more attractive.
Housing first, which is unconditional housing given to people experiencing homelessness, works. The New York Times has reassured us of this for 20 years. A recent article said that Housing First is unjustly under attack. The evidence shows that Housing First is a very successful policy. Undoing it would be a disaster, says one of the three most influential homeless policy experts. And yet, poverty has actually been falling. Poverty rates have fallen for every demographic group in the United States. And yet homelessness is rising. You can see here it has spiked particularly over the last year, but disproportionately in California. Our homeless population grew by an astonishing 31% over the last 20 years, even as it declined 18% in the rest of the United States. There's been a lot more funding for homelessness. Here's a chart of the mental health revenue in California. You see we had a special tax on millionaires, and it's brought in more money than ever for mental health. In Oregon, they're spending much more money on drug rehabilitation as part of a law that decriminalized drugs. And you can see that more people are accessing help in Oregon. So more people are getting help in Oregon. And you can see on the left there, they document how many lives they're saving. But when I interviewed the top mental health advisor in the state of California, the person that personally advises Governor Gavin Newsom I asked him specifically about the funding, whether there's enough money. Here's what he told me.
We keep voting for more money for it. It's not even, I don't even think money's the problem.
Money's not the problem. I don't think money's the problem. I think it's leadership. I think there's a shitload of money. We think it's $11 billion that goes into the state mental health budget. That's number one per capita in the United States.
And yet drug deaths are going up. You can see that in the year 2000, the year I stopped working for the Open Society Foundations, which is George Soros' foundation, advocating decriminalization and harm reduction. I helped to organize civil rights leaders for needle exchanges in the 90s. 20,000 people were dying every year in the year 2000. Last year, 112,000 Americans died from illicit drug overdoses. It's an incredible increase, and you can just see it skyrocketing. 75,000 of those deaths were from fentanyl. If this continues, we're going to have 1 million people dead in a decade from drug deaths. We're all failing on this issue. It's worse in liberal cities. The New York Times, to its credit, finally acknowledged something that we've been pointing out for a while. San Francisco has far more drug overdose deaths than the rest of the United States. Same story in Oregon. So what exactly is going on here? What is happening to our country and to the most vulnerable among us? Today's talk is about empiricism, what empiricism means to me. The root word of empiricism means experience. It doesn't just mean quantitative data, it does mean that, but it also means what we're doing right now. It's about this engagement, it's about an engagement in the world, not just an engagement with data. I've always wanted to engage with the world. When I was 17, I convinced my high school principal to let me go to Nicaragua and help the Sandinistas. Then I went to Brazil and worked with peasants in the semi-Amazon. Traveled all around the world. We went to Rwanda to see how people were interacting and surviving in very difficult conditions, South Asia. And my own views, even on technical matters like nuclear power, are informed by when I meet with people on the ground. Right now, the conventional wisdom is that the best kind of nuclear is nuclear we've never had before. I went to Korea and I interviewed the people that actually run nuclear power plants, and they bragged to me about how little they changed their nuclear power in Korea. I said, surely you're doing something different with these new plants. And they said, no, we're trying not to change anything. We're against innovation. That's only the kind of thing you can learn by talking to people on the ground. That's empiricism. That's what empiricism means to me. My friend, the great Richard Rhodes, who won the Pulitzer Prize for his magnificent book, The Making of the Atomic Bomb, taught me what it means to write serious nonfiction. For Dick Rhodes, if you're going to write about something of the magnitude of the bomb, it means that you must understand quantum mechanics. If you can't understand quantum mechanics, you have no business writing a book about nuclear bombs. At the same time, you must understand Soren Kierkegaard and why Soren Kierkegaard and his view of subjectivity was so important to Niels Bohr, the founder of quantum mechanics. That if you're going to do nonfiction, if you're going to write a proper book, that you must master, you must be interdisciplinary, you must learn philosophy and physics, sociology, history, economics. If you don't know something, then you learn it, because that's part of the story that you're writing about. And that's what I attempted to do in Apocalypse Never. Thrilled to have Dick's blessing for this book. It's a book about the environment ostensibly, but I'm trying to bring into my work every discipline that is necessary to write it. In 2019, I went to this little country in Europe called the Netherlands. Didn't know anything about it. They asked for my advice on nuclear power. I told them just talk to the Koreans. They know everything empirical that you need to know about it. Happy to say that they're actually now working with the Koreans to build nuclear power. I made friends with Dilan Yasilagov on the right, a Turkish immigrant who should be the Netherlands' next prime minister if negotiations go well over the next few days. We became friends, and on the way back from a talk I gave that she hosted, she said, you might be interested in my husband, Rene. And he's sort of a tough guy who's quiet in the back of the car. And he looks a lot like Jason Statham, the action hero. Talks a lot like him too. And I said, you got to answer me a question, Rene, because she said, you may be interested because he works on homelessness and drugs, and it seems like your hometown, San Francisco, has some of those problems. And I was like, yeah, what is going on? He said, look, you need carrots and sticks to deal with people suffering from addiction and mental illness, and you've taken away all the sticks in San Francisco. And that got me curious, so I came back and I Googled in Google Scholar drugs, drug dealing, and I started to take a fresh look at this issue that I had not looked at for 20 years. And the first thing I discover is this paper called Open Drug Scenes, an empirical study of what 5 European countries had done: Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Lisbon, Zurich, and Vienna. And at first I couldn't understand what they were talking about. I didn't know what an open drug scene was. What's an open drug scene? That's not a word we used. And then I read the paper and I realized they were talking about homeless encampments, and that we were using a euphemism, but the Europeans said what those are places where there's drug dealing, and the addicts who buy are so hungry for that medicine that they just use the drugs right there. When I interviewed one of the characters in my book, he said, we walked around San Francisco, he pointed to where he would sleep at night. He said, I had a shelter bed 5 blocks away, but I didn't want to be that far away from the drug dealers. That's how addicted people are in San Francisco right now. And if you look at what they did, in Amsterdam, they shut down the open-air drug scenes. They offered methadone as a temporary replacement drug for the addicts. They said, you don't have to quit drugs, but you can't live on the street. You can't commit crimes. And if you do, then you can choose between jail or rehab. Those are your choices. And so the scholars, in their empirical analysis, they went to all 5 cities, they did these close histories, and it's basically the same recipe in every country in the world. This is how you shut down open-air drug scenes. It's carrots and sticks. It's also called contingency management. It's based on one of the oldest psychological disciplines, which used to be called behaviorism. But contingency management says, and it starts with these experiments in Birmingham, Alabama, with crack addicts. You come into a homeless shelter, you stay with everybody else. Everybody wants their own room. It's the first thing that you want if you're in a congregate shelter. You can have your own room if you pass a drug test. You pass the drug test, you go upstairs, you get your own room. You fail the drug test, you go back downstairs. Nobody goes on the streets, but you don't get that private room unless you pass the drug test. It's the opposite of Housing First. Housing First gives you a private room, no questions asked, no conditions. Housing First is condition-free care, whereas contingency management is shelter for all, housing earned. So then what's going on with Portugal? Did Portugal really just legalize all drugs and stop enforcing drug laws? How did they solve their homelessness and addiction problem if that's the case? I decided to interview the head of Portugal's drug program, and I asked him directly whether it was true that they just legalized drugs and normalized drug use and allowed people to use drugs publicly. It's a little hard to understand, so you may have to strain your ears, but give it a shot.
There are a lot of myths around the Portuguese model. That, for instance, we just liberalize, you do whatever you want, nobody cares, you have your individual freedom, you have all the room to develop the kind of behavior that you wish. That's not the case. It's important to say that using drugs in Portugal is still prohibited under the administrative law. So there's a clear sign of disapproval of our society to the use of drugs. We do not incentivize, we do not normalize the use of drugs.
If somebody in Portugal starts injecting heroin in public, what would happen to them?
Would be arrested. He would be conducted to the police station. The substance or substances would be apprehended, and if he or she has more than the amount that is established by law in a table with different amounts for different substances, if he has more than the amount that is calculated on the basis of personal use for 10 days, he undergoes criminal procedures as before. Okay? If he has less than that amount, he would be intimated to present himself to the commission. It's not a court, it's not a formal instance, but you will be confronted to discuss his drug use with health professionals. It's mandatory, so with a little bit of muscle, I would say, you have them in front of you. We can try to understand what is happening with this person.
What he's saying is that if you have more than 10 days, they confiscate all the drugs. He said they arrest you, they take you to the police station, they confiscate the drugs. If you have more than a 10-day supply of drugs, then you must go in front of a special commission for the dissuasion of addiction. That's what it's called. This is what we call in the United States an intervention. It's your friends and family, it's the judge, it's the police officer, it's the social worker, and they're all there staring at you saying, you've got a problem because you were using heroin and shooting drugs in public. And how do we know that's a problem? Because that's not something that people that don't have a problem do. Why do I show this? Why don't I just tell you that that's what Portugal does? Because it's empiricism. Empiricism means it's more effective for me to show you the head of Portugal's drug program contradicting what the head of Soros's drug program says than it is for me just to relay it to you. So sometimes empiricism is just putting that person forward. It was so exciting to work on San Francisco because Zoom was just emerging as this new research tool. So in the midst of the pandemic, I was able to conduct Zoom interviews with my sources, and then of course I had all these videos so that when the book came out and people said, no, Michael, you're wrong about Portugal, I could just say, let's listen to João Goulão and see what he has to say. So that's good. Those are experts, but we also want what my progressive friends call lived experience. What do people on the streets say? And they say we should listen to people on the streets. And I thought, that's a great idea. Let's interview people on the streets. So my colleague Leighton and I were in San Francisco about to visit the supervised drug site where people could use hard drugs right there in the United Nations Plaza. It was affirmed by the city. We just walked up and had our cameras with us, and Ben eagerly offered to share his views of what was going on. And to put this in context a little bit, my critics were saying that I was wrong and that The people who were homeless in San Francisco, mostly they were just priced out of housing, and they were all local people from San Francisco. So you see, I'm always interested in asking where people are from.
I saw a dude get shot in the back of the head right here on Mission Street, like probably 2 months ago. It was definitely a homeless guy that got shot, and the guy that shot him looks like to probably be homeless.
Where are you from?
Alabama.
How long you been on the street?
7 years.
Drug of choice?
Heroin.
What percentage of people are still using heroin versus fentanyl?
Oh man, 5% still use heroin, maybe.
What about meth?
Meth is just like a given mostly. You got to do something to counteract the downer, so people either do meth or crack.
What does it cost per day?
Between 40 and 80 bucks.
Okay.
To maintain.
Were you using before you came?
I did pills for probably 12 years and then did heroin. Everybody, like the majority of homeless people, are that drugs is integral, if not main reason why you're out here.
And what percentage of people on the street you say are from San Francisco originally?
From San Francisco originally, maybe 10, probably more like 6 or 7%.
How much does it cost to meet your habit?
You're looking at 60 bucks a day.
Has the price come down or gone up?
It's been like a race to the bottom in terms of pricing, to where a gram used to, even as little as 2 years ago would have been $200. Now it's down to 15 or 20.
How do you make your money?
Petty crime.
Like what kind of stuff?
Boosting and getting in unlocked cars.
How do you boost?
You go in a store and put stuff in your bag and get out.
And then where do you sell it?
There's centers, like essentially one corner where everybody in the city goes to sell their shit.
Is that United Nations Plaza?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or today's the flea market. So you would love the flea market. It's hella exciting. I've seen people get stabbed. I've seen people die. I've held somebody as they died.
How'd they die?
Had friends die. They got stabbed in the neck.
People are people on the street because they want to be on the street?
Definitely addiction is the main driving force, and then after that you're in a position to where you're stuck. Like you can't really go back. It's hard to go from, oh okay, I'm done being homeless now, I'm gonna just turn my life around and all of that, especially with addiction to limit. It's doable and it's possible, and I hope to do it someday. But
it's interesting. After we put this out, our critics said that's absurd that just 6% of people on the street are from San Francisco. It's more like 70%. That's the official number. 2 years later, when the San Francisco Police Department cracked down and started arresting addicts, exactly 6% of those arrested were from San Francisco. Grateful to Ben. That's empiricism. That's what I mean by empiricism. The data, the official data, was absolutely wrong, and Ben was spot on. I had a chip on my shoulder, if I'm being honest. When you write a book, you're very proud of yourself. I wrote a whole book on this, and I don't really need to do anything else because you think I'm the expert. But of course, I was not treated as the expert, as you might imagine. The New York Times published a review that claimed that I had only interviewed a single homeless person in all of my research over all those years. And so I had a chip on my shoulder. It's good to have a chip on your shoulder because you work hard, as Dr. Fryer pointed out last night. And I couldn't figure out how to respond to this New York Times review because, of course, if I'm in an argument about how many people I interviewed, then we're actually having a debate about whether or not I'm actually an expert. And so I decided to get my revenge by just interviewing people on the street and letting them tell their story and then putting it on Twitter. And I'm not that hard of a worker, to be honest. Like, I'm as lazy as the next guy. So I just pulled my car over. I saw James there on the tent on the street. I just pulled my car over and was like, would you be willing to talk with me? And I proceeded to get one of the greatest interviews I've ever conducted. It was an interview that ended up becoming global news.
Where are you from?
Louisiana, Texas area.
How long you been in San Francisco?
Since June. If you're gonna be homeless, it's pretty fucking easy here. I mean, if we're gonna be realistic, they pay you to be homeless here.
When you said that San Francisco pays people to be homeless, what did you mean by that? Did you mean that literally?
Yeah. I mean, I get $620 a month, dude.
From general assistance,
yeah.
Or how was that hard to get?
Fucking phone call, bro.
Wow.
Fucking phone call. 200 food stamps and $620 cash a month.
Wow.
Forget about it. Why wouldn't I do it? It's fucking free money, dude. This right now is literally by choice. Literally by choice. Like, why would I want to pay rent? I'm not doing shit. I got a fucking cell phone that I have Amazon Prime and Netflix on. We used to battle with the cops. Now, it's like the cops are... It's like they're your neighbor, cops told us this morning, like, oh, it'd be easier if you guys packed up in the morning. We wouldn't have to come out here. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, pack up your shit in the morning. I'm like, why? You know? He's like, oh, okay. And then went on. His two kids came up and they're like, hey, do you guys know where to get any Oxycontin? They're like, I'm 15 and I'm 16. You know, like, I'm an old school junkie, you know? And I'm like, well, look, dude, I'm going to tell you right now, like, you're not going to get Oxycontin out here on the street. I was like, how much money are you trying to spend? And they're like, we got $40. And I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to take your money. And I went and I got him fentanyl. And I fucking brought it back and I set it down in front of him. And I said, this is a gram of fentanyl. This is enough to kill 6 people that have never used it. What I do to get high is this much. And I showed him how much I do. I was like, I'm keeping your money. And now I'm going to teach you how to save each other's lives because you're not going to fucking stop. I can't steer you away from doing it, but the best thing I could do for you now is give you real drugs and show you how to do it properly and show you how to save your friend's life. And I showed him how to pull up Narcan and how to inject each other with the Narcan needle in case they died. I needed the money, let's be honest.
That's what we call socially responsible business. Give him an ESG certificate. He gave the kids Narcan. I mean, what are you going to do? Arrest him? What did the data show? If you dig a bit, you can find good data. Naturally, it's the biggest studies. A large 5,406 person study of U.S. veterans published in 2021 found the major personal characteristics of the unsheltered homeless were unmarried status, criminal justice problems, weak social support, medical diagnosis, drug but not alcohol problems, low income, and the inability to afford basic needs. When the official Los Angeles city government went out and tried to measure how many people were mentally ill, they came up with that little yellow bar on the left, 25%. When the Los Angeles Times did it, they found 50%, and when UCLA researchers did it, they found 78%. Substance use, 75, health condition, 84. The idea that this is just a problem of high rents, I have never met a sober tech executive who got priced out of his apartment living in a tent on the street. Never has happened. This is a story that most people are aware of. We had large hospitals that housed our mentally ill. We decided that they needed to be shut down. We thought we could treat people in the community. And so we shut them down. I thought it was sort of an old wives' tale. People would say things like, they just put people on the street in the 70s. Just put them on the street. And I was like, that can't be the case. That was the case. They gave them $50 and they were on the street. And that was liberation for the anti-psychiatry movement. Where did all those people go that were let out of the mental hospitals? Many of them became homeless. The first modern homelessness epidemic was essentially a combination of people that were mentally ill that had been in hospitals and crack addicts. The rest went to prisons in this very famous chart now. You can see it wasn't deinstitutionalization, it was trans-institutionalization. We moved people from hospitals to prisons. It's not a compassionate solution. We don't have enough psychiatric beds. You can see what you need. The red line shows you need, according to leading psychiatric experts, 50 psychiatric beds per 100,000 individuals. You can see in Netherlands, Portugal, the European Union, they're above that number. In California, we're well below it. The reason the Netherlands has been able to reduce the number of psychiatric beds is because it's able to get people care in their community. Renee, the guy I mentioned before who looked like Jason Statham, was able to help a friend with schizophrenia live on his own in the community in the ways that people had hoped to do in the 1960s, but it required some amount of coercion. It was a friend of the family. He described grabbing him by the lapels when he was in a psychotic episode and saying, you've got to come with me to the hospital, briefly hospitalized, treated properly with proper psychiatric care, and then gradually brought back into the community. Now he lives alone. Renee said that when he had a psychotic episode recently, called Renee, there's people staring at me through my window, what do I do? And Renee said, try closing the blinds. And he did, and that worked. But not everybody has a Renee Caseworkers are essential. Pairing police and social workers is essential. We know how to deal with these problems. We're not doing it in the United States. We don't have enough psychiatric beds. We've also, in the name of compassion, stopped enforcing what were viewed as insignificant laws like the enforcement of shoplifting. What are you going to do? Send somebody to prison for stealing a deodorant or some candy? It seemed like the right thing to do. 2014, we decriminalized shoplifting up to $950, and we, in the same law, decriminalized drug possession of up to 3 grams of hard drugs. Apparently nobody was in the room that thought, if you decriminalize the hard drug use and the shoplifting, there might be a relationship. Remember what Ben told us, he boosts, that's shoplifting. So we stopped arresting people. There are no statistics. We have no idea how much shoplifting there is because nobody bothers to report it. In the Bay Area or in Portland or in many major cities, if you ask people, did you report your car break-in? Did you report the shoplifting? Why would you? We basically let folks out of the jails, which we all agreed were inhumane, and that's contributed to the crisis. You can see this is correlation, of course, not causation, but a significant rise in the homeless population as we de-incarcerated. The truth is that shelter is the first step to ending homelessness. If you don't think it's compassionate to require people to sleep inside, consider that 3 times more homeless people died in Los Angeles than in New York between 2020 and 2021. This exactly mirrors the percentage of people that are required to be in shelter in New York. New York puts its money in requiring people to have basic congregate shelter. San Francisco says that's not good, or Los Angeles says it's not good enough. Everybody should have their own room, and it leaves people on the street. When you're on the street, it's much more easy to be run over by a car. I'm not saying it's impossible to be run over by a car inside, but it's much more rare to be run over by a car, murdered, or to die of a drug overdose. You get them inside, it's easier to prevent those 3 top forms of death for folks on the street. So in the name of compassion, we're leaving people to die on the street. By the way, this exactly matches, this is the best kind of empirical research, multiple ways to come to the same finding, exactly matches what a Harvard study found after following sheltered and unsheltered homeless over 10 years. The unsheltered were 3 times more likely to die. A view from the streets. I was doing a walk along with the security, they object to being called security. This is a nonprofit contractor to the city of San Francisco called Urban Alchemy. I love them all, actually. They're amazing people. I don't agree with the policies, but of course the people doing the work are real angels. And they don't want to be called security. They call themselves a janitorial service, but it's a security service. That's just how we tell ourselves in San Francisco that it's okay to expand the police force. And we were done with our tour of the safe consumption site, of the safe sleeping site, and we saw this bunch of police barricades in the streets. Like someone had set up police barricades in the street over some heat vents. And we wanted to go check out.
There's people lying in the street. Can we go?
Yeah. Let's go check. Let's get on the side. Walk. Y'all, you need a water? You need a water? Let me check still real quick. Yeah, let's get a water. You guys gonna have to. Hey, beautiful guy, my beautiful man. Hey, my guy. Hey, you okay? Tap on him. Tap him right here. Is he okay? Tap him, brother. You know him? He's your friend? You know him? All right. Hey. Let's get some water. Anybody checked on you today? Nobody checked on you today? Let's get you guys up here.
Sure, man. God bless you, man.
Cool, Mike, at all. I ain't gonna even sit in front like this.
A lot of fentanyl, man.
Yeah.
Fentanyl massacre.
Shit is ugly.
Yeah. Sad.
It's ugly.
Yeah. The orange caps are for the needles, right?
Yeah, that's the one. That's for the needle.
Yeah.
You gotta get out. Get over. You got a broken hip. You got it. Oh shit! You got a broken hip. Why you didn't call the medical? You want somebody to call the medical for you?
No, they already saw me and this on. He said I just gotta heal up.
You gotta heal up. You got it, man. I'm so sorry, but here's your walker, right? I know that broken hip ain't gonna. I don't have any food. Sorry, Larry. All right. Where they at? Yeah, let's flag them down.
Oh, that poor man really broken hip.
What would you do, Mike, in that situation? Tell me. Well, be honest. What would you
If I were the king of the
If you
Tenderloin,
was the king of the TL, what would you do?
I would say you have to go to the hospital.
There you go.
If that man was my father or my
Yeah,
brother, then I would want him to go to the hospital.
Right.
Oh,
You got a
God.
point. You're right.
What does it make you want to do?
Similar to what you said. Like,
Yeah.
you gotta get the treatment, you know?
Yeah.
Why they release you? That would be my question.
Why did they release him?
Yeah, remember you say you went to the hospital and they gotta heal up, but why they release you?
Well, he might have been having withdrawal. I got a couple of moms that got kids on the street, and they get their boys into the hospital, but then they leave the hospital because they need to use every 4 hours.
Okay.
Empiricism is supposed to be objective and free of emotion and free of passion. That's not what David Hume meant by empiricism. Part of the story is your emotional reaction to discovering an old man with a broken hip surrounded by old food, feces, and needles. The reaction to that is part of the story. It's part of the empiricism. It's part of the phenomenon. Cities decide how many people to require to come inside. San Francisco is not requiring people to come inside. So it's just a function of, it's that simple. If you require people to come inside, they come inside. If you don't, they stay outside. You can see it in the numbers. San Francisco and New York has the exact same number of people experiencing homelessness per capita. It just requires them to come inside. It's much harder. New York is just so much more population dense than San Francisco, has a different culture than San Francisco, but it's just a question of shelter versus not shelter. Housing First, turns out the literature shows that it's showed that Housing First has failed for years, decades even. In the spring of 2021, a team of Harvard medical experts found that after 10 years of study, just 12% of the homeless remained housed in Housing First housing. You put addicts in their own apartment and they become trashed. I'm not being mean to addicts. With 3 friends from high school that became homeless drug addicts, 2 of them are dead. I wish they were still here. I'm not being mean in saying that you can't just leave addicts to use drugs in their apartment by themselves. It doesn't work. They die. With heroin, people can maintain a heroin habit for much of their lives. Not with fentanyl. 75,000 dead last year. It'll be 1 million dead in a decade if we continue with business as usual. National Academies of Science, our leading scientific body, reviewed the literature and they found that there's no evidence that Housing First, which is known as permanent supportive housing, contributes to improved health outcomes. And this was all warned over a decade ago. One potential risk of Housing First harm reduction approach would be the worsening of addiction itself. Seems obvious. There's so much evidence that we discovered that Housing First is wrong. It's all ignored by the New York Times, all ignored by Washington Post in favor of ideology. Contingency management works. It's the only thing that works for addicts. Carrots and sticks, says Renee. The thing is, it's not just that we took away the sticks. If you give someone a free apartment and you take it, you're taking it away as a reward for making positive change. In other words, you're taking away the carrot too, not just the stick. This is about ideology. In June last year, I spoke about the roots of the ideology. We don't need to get into it here, but you know what it is. It's victimhood ideology, the idea that you can put some people fit in the category of victim, other people in the category of oppressors. To victims, everything should be given and nothing required. That's a death sentence for addicts. It's a death sentence for people with schizophrenia. If my aunt who had schizophrenia and had very good outcomes, lived in a group home, she just smoked cigarettes and drank coffee and flirted with the waiter all day long, that was a great outcome for her. If they had let her do whatever she wanted, she would be dead. Instead, she lived to the age of 80. We're giving up on our people with this ideology. This was 4 days ago. The New York Times wrote, repealing decriminalization in Oregon would be a mistake. There are still Stalinists in the world. There are still communists in the world. There are still people who think that those were good ideologies. They're not going to change their minds. We're not going to persuade them. They're not our target audience. Change is coming. My book was early, but you can see the impact of all of this. Someone asked me, they're like, do you just try to do the research and then hope that it lands out there in the world? Absolutely not. You've got to package your ideas. You've got to make your ideas accessible to people. We've got to put them together. Sometimes you have to run for governor in order to really get your ideas out there. my friend Leighton Woodhouse assembled, we would go all over San Francisco and find ourselves in situations that we probably shouldn't have been in. And I said, can we just put together kind of the greatest hits of what we did? And here's what he produced.
Broad daylight, I saw someone get raped.
I've been raped, bullied, picked on, stripped naked, robbed.
Somebody gets stabbed.
I mean, like someone robbed me with a machete today of all my stuff.
Hit in the head with crowbars and bats.
I saw you get shot in the back of the head.
Somebody getting shot?
Do they live?
No.
You will end up getting hurt out here.
The other homeless people are like your worst enemy.
These people do not play out here. Besides, I have weapons. I have my protections.
Okay. What kind of weapons?
Bats, hatchets, knives, mace, tasers.
And what's your drug of choice, brother?
Heroin.
Crystal meth.
Meth and heroin.
Crystal meth.
Meth?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that doesn't smoke.
You don't know anybody that doesn't smoke meth?
No.
We saw a woman who was pregnant just now.
Yeah.
What is she smoking?
Fentanyl.
She's smoking fentanyl? And she's 8 months pregnant?
Yeah.
So are you seeing more people showing up in psychotic states naked now than, say, 2-3 years ago?
Yes, I think so.
I don't know what they're putting in this stuff. I don't know if it was aliens. I'm not trying to sound crazy and stuff.
No, it's fine.
Must be causing all these like psychological breakdowns. And I think that they had put like a transmitter or something because I was able to hear and communicate, and it looked like I was talking to myself.
My job was to intake homeless individuals on the street.
I don't have to be on the streets. I just choose to be.
You just choose to be?
A lot of people are out here because they want to be out here.
Everyone's usually has a serious drug problem.
They kind of quit society.
This right now is literally by choice.
Did you get the sense that Pat cared whether they were on drugs?
No, and I'm not trying to be like crazy with it, but definitely not.
I mean, if we're gonna be realistic, they pay you to be homeless here.
They make it so easy and normalize it.
Drug dealers are just being let go over and over and over.
It's like the cops are, it's like they're your neighbor, you know?
They enable them because they allow the open air drug market.
Open street dealing like that, with the cops just across the street, like, watching them.
I think they've given up on the people that are out there on the street.
I've never seen anything like it. I've been in the game for fucking 30 years, dude. Never seen anything like it.
Things are starting to change, at least in the media. California spent $17 billion on homelessness. It's not working. This is the underpass that Leighton and I are at. This is the most scared I've ever been, is under this underpass, inside these chain fences like a half mile in. This is from the New York Times. God bless Germán Lopez, the only honest person at the Times. In San Francisco, harm reduction programs such as GLIDE do not require staff to guide people toward treatment. It's even stronger than that. They prohibit people from guiding people towards treatment. They argue that such pushiness could scare away clients who are not interested in quitting drugs. They often cite the drug policies of British Columbia, a global leader in harm reduction, but British Columbia set a record for overdose rates last year. Gavin Newsom, 3 days ago, sent 120 California Highway Patrol officers to govern Oakland because it had become ungovernable. And it's one thing when it's just the inner city neighborhoods being impacted, but they're getting home invasions in a neighborhood called Piedmont, which is one of the most ritzy neighborhoods in California. Hard to run for president with people doing home invasions in Piedmont. And Mayor Breed has even joined, as the Chronicle points out, a GOP-led effort, heaven forbid, to overhaul Prop 47. This is what I mean by empiricism. The UN Drug Plaza, that's where they had the supervised drug consumption site, where my friend Nellie Bowles found me after I had gotten into the drug consumption site. I'm never going to reveal my journalism strategy to get into the drug consumption site, but I was in there. Shh, Nellie. I got myself in the drug consumption site. Of course, the Chronicle put it in their paper. And now the mayor, we got rid of the drug consumption site. I did not want the drug consumption site in there. The mothers who have kids on the street asked us to try to get it shut down. We did that. And now they are cracking down for the first time on the drug dealing there on the streets. This is what empiricism means to me. I'll end with Dennis Culhane. You may remember earlier in this presentation, I mentioned there was one of the most influential homeless policy advocates in the country, experts. Dennis Culhane, University of Pennsylvania, does a lot of the big analysis for housing and urban development. He said, we must defend housing first. It's the only thing that works. Very different story when you get him to open up a little bit, as I did when we talked.
It was advocates who coined the phrase homeless. Kim Hopper and Bob Hayes, Mitch Snyder, Mary Ellen Holmes. They're the ones who thought homeless would be a soft, fluffy term for the public to be sympathetic of. But there were less polite terms being used for many years before that. It's mainly the domain of a bunch of charities who are unlicensed, unfunded, relatively speaking. They rely on a lot of private donations by unqualified people who do a shitty job. It should be a professional service done by people with master's degrees who are qualified, paid adequately, and who are expected to do the job and get it done with the outcome we want. Not just assign you willy-nilly, oh, I got a case manager over here who sometimes, I don't know where they went. If you have someone who's consistently like using drugs in public, they're not able to live in a conventional apartment because they're always getting evicted, they're starting fires, they're violent, whatever the case may be. And for those people, I do believe some contingencies to shape their behavior could lead them into a conventional apartment. People have ideology. They've turned housing first into an ideology and not into a actual practical understanding of choice. Because choice means options. And if my only option is to live on my own somewhere where I'm going to be isolated and there's no rules about my behavior, I'm going to die. I can't live, I'm going to kill myself in that situation because I can't control it.
That's what's happening out here.
So I'm saying that's what we have. So I hope you
say this. What happens when you say that to the advocates? What do they say?
I haven't really said, I just make sure I tell the advocates that I am not ideological about housing first, and neither should they be. This job is about being practical and listening to people and listening to what they need and want and what are they saying. And what people are telling you is that they want contingencies in many cases. They certainly think their neighbors need contingency. When we surveyed people in supported housing in New York, I remember almost everybody wanted their neighbors to be clean and sober, but they didn't want themselves. They didn't want to have rules themselves about being clean.
That's what empiricism means to me.